So, today we're going to dive into a pretty radical idea. What if lust, the thing so often labeled a sin, could actually be something else entirely? What if we started to see it not as a threat, but as a path to grace, to dignity, and maybe even to faith? Let's get into it.
And yeah, this is the big question, isn't it? It's really provocative, for sure. It pushes back against centuries of tradition, and it asks us to look at human desire in a totally new light. I mean, could one of the so-called deadly sins really be a pathway to something divine?
Kisses burn like fire. Just sit with that line for a second. It's so simple, but it's packed with this intense sensory detail, right? It pulls us right out of abstract ideas and into the real physical world of the body. And this image, this burning warmth, it's the key that's going to unlock this whole story.
So how in the world do you even begin to unpack an idea this huge? Well, we're going to ground it in a really fascinating case study, a pop song of all things. It's Wonderful Life by the band Hertz. And as we'll see, the lyrics capture this incredibly profound moment, a moment caught right between total despair and a glimmer of hope. Okay, so here's the scene. The story kicks off in this space of transition. You've got a family man, but he's completely broken, literally down on his knees. And he meets a woman, Susie, at Temple Station. And that name, Temple Station, that's just brilliant, right? It's a real place in London, but here it's also like this secular temple, where a whole different kind of ritual is about to happen.
And get this, there are no words exchanged, no dialogue, no "how are you?" just a look. And that silent understanding is so crucial. It's this kind of deep existential communication that just goes way beyond words. That one look, that gaze, becomes the foundation for everything that's about to happen.
And what happens next? Well, it's the most challenging, most controversial part of the entire song. So let's try to look at this moment not as a transgression, but through a totally different lens, as this dramatic, almost shocking act of rescue.
Yeah, you heard that right. She throws him against the wall. Now, on the surface, that sounds aggressive, maybe even violent. I know your first instinct is probably to judge it, but what if that's not what's really going on here? What if this is something else entirely?
So here's the reframing. This man is numb, right? He's completely paralyzed by his despair. So from this perspective, her action isn't an assault, it's an awakening. It's not a moral transgression, but a kind of symbolic medicine. A shock to the system meant to jolt him out of that paralysis. It's a rescue.
In this moment, it introduces us to this really key theological idea, active grace. It's the concept that grace isn't always something you hear in a sermon from a pulpit. Sometimes it's something you feel. It's an embodied experience that arrives through physical closeness, through sheer presence.
So Susie's role here completely shifts. She's not a temptress in this story. She becomes this kind of therapeutic figure, a priestess of touch. She sees his wound. She gets it without him having to say a single word, and she acts intuitively to heal him. She's the channel for that active grace.
And that means the kiss that comes next, the one that burns like fire, it's not about romance or seduction, not at all. It's sacramental. It's this therapeutic warmth that awakens him, not just physically, but spiritually. It is basically a sacrament of revival. It brings him back to the feeling of being alive.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. How do we get from this one intense moment in a pop song to the foundation of a whole new theology? Well, that's what we're going to look at now. The huge, broader implications of this one story.
And this right here, this is the absolute core of the argument. For centuries, so many traditions have treated the body and its desires like an obstacle to be overcome. This idea just flips that on its head. It says, no, the body is exactly the place where salvation can and does happen.
So the radical proposal here is that desire, what we can call Eros, can act as a kind of spiritual first aid. That when someone is totally broken, cut off, unable to feel anything, lust can be the raw, powerful force that reconnects them to life. In this way of thinking, lust is a medicine.
So, if we actually run with this premise, what would it look like in the real world? Well, the story in this song can be broken down into a whole new ethical framework, 6 principles that could totally reshape how the church approaches human desire.
Okay, here they are. 1. Eros can be the starting point for grace. 2. Rules and morality are pretty worthless if they don't actually offer people comfort. 3. If you believe God became flesh, you can't be shocked when salvation happens in the flesh. 4. Bless touch, but also fiercely protect consent and boundaries. 5. Listen to people's pain before you start handing out rules. And finally, number 6, see desire not as a problem to be solved, but as the very language of hope.
So where does all this leave us? Well, it suggests a pretty profound shift in what the Church's mission could be. A move away from judgment and toward a really radical embrace of the full human experience, body, soul, the whole shebang.
You know, traditionally, the Church's model has often been, first you follow the rules, then you get grace. This song just flips that whole script. It says, no, first comes comfort, and that leads to transformation. First comes grace, and that's what gives a person the strength to take responsibility for their life.
Here's a really powerful metaphor to help us get it. Desire is the ambulance for the Church. I love that. It suggests that embracing a healthier, more compassionate view of human desire isn't just some side project, it could be a life-saving mission. It's the first responder that actually meets people where they're hurting.
And that brings us right back, full circle, to that one controversial moment. But now we can see it with this totally new understanding, all wrapped up in this one sentence. The act wasn't about aggression. It was a desperate, necessary, and ultimately grace-filled act of resurrection.
So we're going to end where we started. But this time, the question is for you. If we take this idea seriously, that grace and salvation can be physical, tangible things that happen in our bodies, not in spite of them, what does that change for you? How does that change the way you see yourself, your desires, and your own search for meaning?